I know. He is a good one.
We're going to say good morning to everybody.
Good morning.
I can't hear you.
Good morning.
Very, very good. Can you hear me fine?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You can hear me in the back? Yeah. I don't want to bust anybody's eardrums, so I will not use this mic. My name is Alex Habersham. I'm from Macon, Georgia, and I'm the publisher of the Macon, Middle Georgia Black Pages, which is a business directory of African American businesses in Central Georgia. Joining me today are my colleagues, Ms. Bethany Rogers, who's the Executive Director of Newtown Loan in Macon, Georgia, and Mr. Ricardo Cardu, who is a business consultant for Newtown Loan. Let's welcome them. This is a little homework to get taken care of before we get started. Number one, please take the session survey. Number two, download the app and join the conversation. And number three, please silence your mobile phone. I grew up in Macon, and I worked at this place called Piggly Wiggly, which was a grocery store there. And as a teenager, I delivered groceries on streets all over town, you know, pushing a buggy. And sometimes the people parked quite a few streets away from where the store was located. But one thing I noticed at the time, and this was in the early 60s, I noticed that there were a lot of intermingled African American businesses located downtown that were flourishing. And the interesting thing is that they were combined, you know, with the majority of businesses there, and, you know, things went really well, and then they even had integrated customers. And, you know, and you would be pretty much amazed at the kind and number of businesses that were down there. You know, we had this is back in the early 60s, you know, and maybe kind of entering into the 70s, but we had 40 grocery stores, 17 barber shops, 15 cafes, 8 cleaning and pressing shops, 5 butcher shops, 3 banks. I'm going to repeat that because there are none there now. 3 black-owned and operated banks during that time. We had 2 blacksmith shops, and I don't know if there's that much need for it now, but we had 2 theaters, 1 haberdashery, and 1 hospital, which was Macon Hospital. The reason I know, you know, and this was a segregated hospital, but I know because, lucky for everybody here, I was born there. Just kidding, okay. And I really recall, and you know, I know you've heard about Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street. Well, we had a Black Wall Street in Macon, Georgia, that was not deliberately destroyed by any phenomenon or any group of people. And I mean, it's pretty much amazing that there were all our people come from the surrounding cities, you know, and at the time the street was called Broadway, you know, but I mean, you could hardly, it's worse than out there. You could hardly walk down the street because of the number of people there shopping in all of these different locations and having fun and going back to, since nobody's here, but they really were little country towns that were close to Macon, and they would come and shop, and then they would really enjoy it. Now, one guy that really stands out as it relates to doing business during those times, and he was a millionaire, self-made. And I want to emphasize the importance of having minority businesses, black-owned businesses in a community. Oftentimes we don't realize the peripheral benefits of having those kinds of businesses there, and it's good for the entire community for a lot of reasons. You know, educational reasons, academic reasons, economic reasons, civic reasons, social reasons, you know, and sometimes we don't understand or acknowledge the peripheral effects of having a community with good businesses, with EDI businesses where everybody is doing well because everybody wins. Now this guy, Charles Douglas, you know, he was just as sporty as that hat he had, you know, but he founded the Douglas Theater and Hotel. He had a shoe shop, he had a liquor store, he had a pool room, beauty shop, restaurant, and several investment properties. So he was kind of the mainstay in Macon, Georgia, as it relates to, but there were several others. And the good thing about it was not just a district. It was not just one street where you had African-American businesses. I mean, they were just interspersed all over town. And those were good times, you know, and I remember that. And they were very, very advantageous, particularly for African-Americans during that time. Now, however, you know, that did not last. That did not last. You know, all the Black Wall Street just kind of diminished, and the businesses began to fail and fall, and downtown itself began to kind of deteriorate, but the African-American businesses deteriorated at a rate faster than, you know, the majority. And I think it's attributable to a lot of reasons. It's called malls. One reason that downtown began to deteriorate because, you know, the Macon Mall was established at the time, but I mean, it was really, it really was almost a ghost town compared to the way it used to be and compared to the number of businesses that used to be down there. Now that's the Douglas, you know, and we just need to be honest with ourselves. Part of the problem was desegregation. You know, because prior to desegregation, then most African American businesses were visited by African Americans. Primarily, probably, totally. But with desegregation, then some of these African American consumers began to go to majority businesses. And, you know, I guess that has its upside and its downside. The downside is that many of these black-owned businesses failed because they didn't have the same kind of attraction or the same number of consumers that they had prior to desegregation. You know, that's a whole nother conversation, which, you know, maybe if you want to talk to me later on, I'll spend a few minutes with you to do that. But the interesting thing, now this is the Douglas Theater. This is the guy who had that hat on owned the Douglas Theater. And before I turn it over to Ms. Bethany, I just want to tell you something like a dichotomy or an oxymoron, or I can call it what you want to. But at this theater in Macon, Georgia, you know, Little Richard from Macon, Georgia, y'all, you know, got his start at the Douglas Theater. James Brown. A lot of people don't know that. But you know, Augusta is claiming here. But he used to live here right up the street from me. Bessie, I never went about Bessie. Little Richard, James Brown, watch me, Otis Redding. Otis Redding is from Macon, Georgia, and I knew Otis person. Now, Otis used to do talent shows at the Douglas when he was young, but they stopped him from coming because he won 15 in a row. You know, and that's the kind of activity that was going on at the time in Macon, Georgia, and that hotel kind of closed. Next slide. So it went from being a flourishing downtown to kind of like of those towns. But Bethany has a story to tell as it relates to what was done about that. Bethany?
Don't worry, he's coming back. He's coming back. But somebody has to follow Alex, and I'm the unlucky person to do that. So, like I'm sure all of you, you know the story of the dying American city. And Macon was maybe a little later to pick up the mantle and decide to do something about it. But fortunately for us at Macon, in 1996, the woman who was the chair of one of our local foundations, the Peyton Anderson Foundation, had the vision to establish the organization that Ricardo and I work for. It's called Newtown Macon. When we were established just about 25 years ago now, the vision was that we would be a nonprofit that was dedicated to leveraging public-private partnerships and redevelopment projects. And our mission is to invest, attract, and leverage self-sustaining transformation. And we've always really had a three-pronged approach to our work, all the 25 years we've been at it. The first is to foster a sense of place. So a lot of the placemaking, for us, a lot of that work has been around building a trail system around the river, our river downtown, public space development, of course, retail events, marketing events, shop local promotions, those kinds of things. Residents, and we've done that primarily through housing development. I'm going to talk to you about that more in a moment. And then jobs, which we have done primarily through the development and support of small businesses in our downtown core. So our first success actually at Newtown in the early years was really around sense of place and the development of the trail system around our river. When it came to actually revitalizing the Central Business District, that proved to be a lot harder and really took some time. We actually invested a lot through a grant program into small businesses and got zero net new businesses for many, many, many dollars that got invested in that program. So our watershed moment actually came more than a decade later, almost about 15 years later. In 2011, we actually sponsored a residential market study, and that study told us that we could produce 200 loft units in our downtown, 200 loft units a year that would be absorbed, that would be rented by the market in Macon, Georgia, and we had only produced 6. So that means we could have produced 194 units that could have gotten rented up. Well, we started to look into this issue and figure out, well, why is this not happening? If there is the market demand, why are we not creating housing units in that way? And we had some local developers who were very interested in it and were more enthused once the market study came out that yes, there really would be demand if we take some of these really big old buildings that are being underutilized and turn the upper stories into housing units. The problem was the banks weren't real comfortable with it. And for those of you that are familiar with how real estate finance works, the banks were like, okay, we'll come in and lend, but we're only going to lend you about half the project cost, right? Because that way, if it goes bad, we're covered, we'll still have the building, and we'll be good. So when it's a multi-million-dollar project and the bank only wants to lend 50%, even if you're a wealthy developer, you really don't have anywhere to go. So this was the birth of Newtown Macon becoming a real estate lender. We went to our county government, they issued some bonds that had allowed us to manage them, and we got into the work of being a secondary real estate lender. So we come in and lend behind a bank so we can really reduce that equity gap so the developer does not have to put in so much money. You know, it's much more plausible that they can make that investment and move forward. And this has really become our bread and butter kind of real estate investment that we do. This was the very first one that we did just about a decade ago now. It's called the Dannenberg. It resulted in 64 loft units and 3 commercial spaces on the first floor. I will say our real estate lending has evolved since that time. We do also work with some folks who cannot qualify for real estate financing. So sometimes now we are the only lender. And I'm going to talk to you more about an emphasis that we really have on converting our renting entrepreneurs into becoming owner occupants as well. So we learned by default that retail really does follow rooftops, and so do bars and restaurants and so on. And so once we actually started having people living downtown, then that business development piece became a lot more natural. And in fact, a lot of it started to happen organically. More businesses started to show up because they saw the people living downtown. There was more market demand. And so we decided, though, because a lot of people were still coming to us and saying, could you support us in our ventures to launch small businesses? So we decided to get into the work of also financing and supporting small businesses. And this was about 6 years ago now, 7 years ago. So we got a donation from a donor. We created an endowment, and we actually have a line of credit against that endowment. So we draw down that money to invest in small businesses. So we were clear from the beginning that we would invest in businesses that banks weren't comfortable doing, right? We would do startups, which banks don't like, and we would do that hospitality sector, which you all know are the kinds of businesses we all want in our downtown because they make them vibrant and they generate foot traffic, but banks don't want to touch them with a 10-foot pole, right? Bars, restaurants, hotels, and so on. But naturally, by default, especially because we were willing to work with people who were startup entrepreneurs and they had maybe never worked with a lender before, we had a lot of women, and because Macon is a majority black city, we are 55% black, many black entrepreneurs coming to us for support. And we had always had group training programs with our real estate lending, and we realized we also should pair that with our business lending. So I think also because we already had that coaching piece as part of our lending work, that we saw that a lot of first-time borrowers, again, especially women and BIPOC entrepreneurs, black entrepreneurs, really came to work with us to get financing and either launch or expand their business concepts. So when we started the work as a small business lender, we had never heard of community development financial institutions, or CDFIs. But as we started to fundraise more to be able to increase our capacity, in particular to do the small business lending piece, and we worked with some consultants, and they said, you really meet all the parameters that the U.S. Treasury oversees this program. It's called the CDFI Fund, and you can become designated as a Community Development Financial Institution, or CDFI. So not too long ago, I'd say about 4 years ago, we sort of started this process, and we were designated 2 years as an emerging CDFI and just over a year ago as a certified CDFI. So the three core characteristics that you have to fulfill to be designated as a CDFI by the U.S. Treasury is that you target underserved markets. So what the Treasury looks for is CDFIs who are either working in rural communities, low-income communities, or working with women or people of color. Those are the core target markets that they want to see that you serve. That you pair your financing with technical assistance, not only to help people get ready, application loan ready, but also once they close their loan, that you continue to support them to be sure that they are successful borrowers and successful entrepreneurs. And that you have community impact, right? That you're creating small businesses, building wealth, that you can demonstrate that you're producing affordable housing units, and so on. So I will say that, one of the motives for us to become a CDFI was that it provided us other options to capitalize or raise money to lend. There are CDFIs that are banks and credit unions. They, of course, have the deposits of their customers that they can use to lend out. When you're a loan fund, like what Newtown is, a nonprofit, you have to find that money somewhere. You don't have it from your customers. So there are avenues that get presented to you as a CDFI. The U.S. Treasury has some grant programs. Banks can get Community Reinvestment Act fund, Community Reinvestment Act credit if they invest in you as a CDFI, so there can be some partnerships there. But the most fundamental thing about our work as a CDFI, since we took on this designation and began this journey, is that we learned that we needed to revamp how we do what's called underwriting. So in deciding who we're going to invest in, one of the important things to understand here is that, like in Macon, and I think you find this in a lot of your communities, that there's banks and then there's predatory lenders, and there's really nobody in between. And there are all kinds of reasons, and we'll talk about this just a little bit, of why really investment-worthy entrepreneurs, residents of your community, you should invest in them. And if all they have is the option to go the hard money lender, or now this proliferation of the online lenders who just swipe your accounts daily, and can be just really wreck anyone's financials, personal business or otherwise. So you need someone in that space in between. And we talk, in the CDFI space, we talk a lot about the CDFIs being the minor leagues, really trying to get people to graduate up to be bank ready and be able to access traditional financing. But you really need someone in that space in between to serve that gap. But one of the big things then, that means you need to understand and assess risk in a way different than banks do, so that you can invest and those folks. And there's a lot more to this, but I'm going to focus on the ways in which CDFIs do what they call character-based lending. So underwriting, is the process in the finance world where they decide if you're going to approve your loan or not. So one thing that CDFIs do is they look at social impact. They can use that as a metric to determine if this project is something that's worth investing in. Part of our underwriting process, we look at if a borrower is coachable. We understand if you've not been taught how to write a proper business plan, but will you work with staff and get staff support to generate a complete business plan and set of financial projections? That's something that we actually use as an evaluation method in our underwriting process. And instead of looking at credit score, we look at have you been responsible in the last 6 months to a year, depending on the size of the loan, and repaying any kind of credit or bills that you have. So, and I don't know if any of you recently seen, Bank of America has come out with a new mortgage product that's targeted to Latino and Black homeowners. And they've actually taken a page out of the CDFI playbook here, and they are not going to use credit scores. They are also going to look at credit repayment history. So they are also experimenting with that. Now, one of the things that I think is really fascinating about the CDFI, and I have this up here mostly for this bottom line here, is that even though CDFIs are investing in these neighborhoods that banks don't want to get into, even equity investors don't want to touch, or they're investing in borrowers that banks wouldn't traditionally invest in, they're still highly performing entities. Only 1% of all the millions and millions and millions of dollars that CDFIs invest in have resulted in a loss. 1% of the millions of dollars. I think that's amazing and important for people to understand that you really can make these risky investments and get quite a return. So the biggest challenge though for us at Newtown has always been to generate a pipeline of loan-ready BIPOC entrepreneurs. And the reasons for this run very deep. Macon, Georgia was the most redline city in the United States. Not one of the most redline city in America. This is, for us, unfortunately, an infamous newspaper article that was published in the Washington Post in 2008. And I'm sure all of you know, working in this space, you know about the negative effects of redlining, right? So homeownership is the #1 tool in the United States for accumulating wealth. There's all kinds of ways that investing in a home really benefits someone. Once you pay that mortgage down, it can be a retirement plan. You don't have that huge bill. So it can be a retirement plan. Of course, a lot of people pass that piece of property on to their children or their grandchildren. They can either sell it or they have it as an asset in their lives. But when you disrupt that, or maybe even prevent that kind of generational wealth transfer, then you're going to have some serious racial wealth gaps. So in Macon, Georgia, Black residents are 3 times more likely than white residents to live in poverty. And because we're majority Black, we have 10 times the poverty rate of any cities in America, 10 times. So, and one of the big things that this affects, I think, besides just clearly the fact that they're working with less wealth, is really that financial literacy around it. And a lot of folks come to us and they really want to focus on their business credit because the personal financial piece has been such a challenge that they really haven't dealt with that. And we know that they're interrelated. And so a lot of the work that we have to do is really a lot of times actually around the personal financials when we work with entrepreneurs. And so we have to be very intentional about how we can bring those folks in and really start them through what can be a very long-term process to improve their personal financials and become loan ready and become, ready to have a concept and be a viable entrepreneur. So as we started this work around 2018, 2019 to become a CDFI, Alex Habersham approached us about a concept called the Downtown Diversity Initiative Program, and I'm going to have Alex come back up and tell you how he came about with the vision and how we generated this partnership that's become such an important tool to our work as a CDFI.
Well, I began, Newtown Macon was doing phenomenal work, to take that dying ghost town of downtown Macon and revitalize it. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. And I began to notice that. Well, I told you, I'm old enough to remember when we had Making Black Wall Street. And as I saw the growth in businesses downtown increasing, then I said, well, maybe we need to do something about making sure that we got some DEI downtown as it relates to those businesses. So I said, there's an organization that deals with downtown development in the form of Newtown Macon. So I approached him. Raise your hand, George. I know you're shy. There's the executive. He's going to fuss at me, but that's okay. I'll take it. But he's the guy that I approached initially because he's in charge of the organization. And he immediately latched onto it. And the concept was to initiate a program where we could kind of get more black-owned and operated businesses downtown. And that's why it's called the Downtown Diversity Initiative. Well, based on what I do on a daily basis, which is promote, identify black-owned businesses in my directory, then we didn't have a problem with recruitment. So we were able to recruit a sizable number, and Ricardo is going to talk about that when we come up. But one thing we discovered is that, and I guess that's where the expression mom and pop comes from. Because I guess they do all the work in the kitchen. So we had to kind of go beyond, just regular training and try to begin to approach the aspiring and existing businesses where they are. So we found that they were just chomping at the bit to learn the information, but there was a big need for training. Even today, even with existing businesses, a lot of times we don't realize, particularly with AI and all of the factors that influence being successful in business, there was a big need for training. And Newtown Macon had the personnel, the mechanism, and the wherewithal to provide that training. Additionally, we found it phenomenally beneficial as it relates to the interaction and the networking of these individuals who were very, very interested in going into business and who were also interested in improving their businesses. And like I said, I already had the relationship with them, and Newtown, just does a phenomenal job of training and amassing the information, the technology, and the mechanism to be successful in training. And most importantly, and I'm so glad that Bethany talked about trying to consider other factors in determining whether or not somebody would qualify for a loan. I'm glad that, people are beginning to mention character and things of that nature because of certain economic and life and sociological circumstances, there may be some barriers that are affecting these individuals who are desirous of becoming entrepreneurs, and Newtown was able to accomplish that. Okay, so we got it started. We kicked it off in 2019, and there were about 30 or so people who applied for the program, and these are the winners. Now, but everybody won. Everybody won because of the networking, the knowledge, and the relationships. And initially, they only it was a $1,500 grant, but as we progressed, then the money increased and things of that nature. So it was just outstanding. And somebody else gonna say it, but I'm gonna say it too. This would not be possible without the support and the help of certain organizations and foundations in the community. So they latched onto it in cooperation with Newtown Macon, and we kicked it off. I'm gonna slow down here. The program is called the Downtown Diversity Initiative, and we were very serious serious about creating more opportunities for African American businesses downtown. And we were very intent on doing that. And that's why it progressed. This is the third year, you know, and it has gotten better every year. And these are our winners. And, you know, they are happy. Now look how happy they are, and they only won $1,500. What you think about the other ones, and the time for a call? Mm-hmm. Well, now, the program was very, very successful. Now, this was the first program, which was good, but the next two programs were phenomenal. You know, in a lot of ways, networking, training, information. And the young man to my left who's standing up over there is the person responsible to a large part of how well the program has done in the last 2 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ricardo Cardew.
All right, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Bethany. And so, community and collaboration, why does that matter? In 2019, with the help of University of Georgia and Fanning, the institution, we were able to create the first phase of our Entrepreneur Academy. I also want to thank the Community Foundation, the Knight Foundation, and the Peyton Anderson Foundation for the investment. With anything, you need investment to go forward. And so also I want to talk about Alex in 2019, talk about timing. When timing needs preparation. We had just introduced the curriculum to the community, and Alex came at the perfect time, so we were able to do that first downtown diversity initiative in 2019 and have the information ready for the people. And so that was very important. And so COVID hit, so we had to skip a year, right? But during that time, we found out about Zoom even more and all these other softwares that we started using to be able to connect with people. So a thought came to the team, why not create online videos so people can access the information? Because in the first cohort, we were actually introducing the information, they were learning, and we were trying to apply it right then and there. It's hard for the entrepreneurs to catch on, so why not create video access? And so we spent 360 hours redoing the project, redeveloping the concept of what we were teaching. And we found out that, so normally when people walk through my door, probably only 1 out of 50 entrepreneurs have a business plan that is done. And we're not even talking about correct. But at least done, right? And so we found out that we introduced the Canvas concept, and I'll show you what that looks like later on, that allows us to diagnose what our entrepreneurs really need, okay? And so in 2022, we actually invested in some software, which is Cvent, and we're able now for the first time to allow the entrepreneurs to be able to access the videos, the worksheets from their phone and from the computer. So a lot of entrepreneurs are working full-time, they're parents, they have children, and so to have access and come to class and be prepared to actually know what we're talking about, we've seen an immediate change in the entrepreneurs and their participation. So this right here is our curriculum, okay? And so first of all, I just want you to think about being introduced for the first time. If you've never been an entrepreneur, you think about being an entrepreneur. This right here is a lot easier to consume versus a business plan where you got 30, 40 pages of notes, okay? And so I'm gonna go through each class, but I'm gonna choose one sore point that we've seen that really helped our entrepreneurs get to the next level. And so for the first part, we're gonna talk about the personal financial statement. Who ever heard of PFS before in the room? Okay, so just imagine you as an entrepreneur not knowing about your personal finances, about your balance sheets, about assets and liabilities. If what I'm saying to you doesn't make sense, just imagine you being in an area where the poverty level is below average in the community. Look how much struggle that is. Going on to class 2, talking about the total available market, which is TAM. Just knowing about your investors, how many people in your community actually will buy your product. A lot of entrepreneurs didn't know how many people they could sell the product to. If you don't know who you're selling to, how are you going to sell your product, right? And so we really diagnose that and be able to connect them with local organizations like SBDC, which is a Small Business Development Center, who had that information, that research that was free, so they can see, exactly what they were able to sell to the community. Also, going to class 3, We talked about the product development and pricing. We found out that our people did not know how to price their products correctly. How many people are in the business? Do you want to make money or lose money? Okay, we're here to make money. That's why I tell people, we're here to make money, make a dollar, make a difference. So it's very important for people to know about their sales product. Also going to class 4, we start going into the financial projections. We talked about PFS. We also talk about balance sheets, all these different things, all this vocabulary I'm telling you. Just imagine you go into a bank for the first time, they ask you that question you never heard. And so us being an organization, be able to explain it and break it down, we've seen our entrepreneurs transform right in front of us. Okay? Class 5, we talk about compliance. How many people know that you need an EIN number, you need a business bank account, you need to be registered with the state that you're in, you know, and so being able to sit down and educate people, really help them and set them up for leverage, okay? And so I'm gonna bring you into my class real quick. And so what I usually do when the people first come in, I say, hey, take out your canvas. This nice canvas right here. This is gonna be your best friend. And you're gonna hate it at the same time because it should tell you a story. Now, if you see, as it comes to the story, if it doesn't connect, that means you have to go back and do it again. Because we want to be able to tell people a story about your business so it can connect the dots, so you can make it make sense. If it doesn't make sense, it won't make money, okay? And this is our self-paced cohort learning that we like to do. This is our favorite part of the class because we actually get to break off into groups. And for the first time, we started seeing our entrepreneurs begin to teach each other, to hold each other accountable, to connect. I've heard multiple people say, man, I found lifelong partners, business partners, lifelong friends. A lot of entrepreneurs didn't know there were so many entrepreneurs in the community that were trying to do similar things or different walks of life, but they could collaborate and help each other out. So it's such a good energy in the community now to see people winning together. Okay, and so I'm going to switch lanes a little bit. I'm going to talk about the numbers. So as you can see, in 2019, we had 25 participants. We kind of figured out that 20 is probably the magic number. Just because being able to deal with entrepreneurs one-on-one, introducing the information, the curriculum to them, they need more time with us to digest the projects. In 2021, we had 35, so that's right after COVID. And so we had a big push for people who really wanted to do business and know how to do it correctly. In 2022, we had 35 again. You see that's the max, you can't go over that. And then I wanted to also point out the yearly graduates. See, it started off at 12, then went to 20, then went to 17. Now, what I realized is why that's happened is because everybody's not cut out to be an entrepreneur, right? And so you have to be exceptional to be an entrepreneur. We know that, you know, it's 90% failure rate within 5 years, and it's 99% failure rate if you don't have finances. Just know that in this whole curriculum that we've been teaching, we've seen people get the best jobs they ever got in their life. We've seen them move into new houses. We've seen entrepreneurs set up storefronts. We've seen them do all types of things and be impactful in the community. So just know that it's more than just about being in business. It's about helping your community out one person at a time. And also, I just wanted to point out also that we had, in the last 2 years, we actually got 265 applications who were interested in actually being a part of the organization, but we were only to help 95 in these past couple of years. But the great thing is we were able to give up to $70,000 in grants, and we helped 14 entrepreneurs be able to get grants up to $5,000, and we also set some people up for loans too also. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch lanes, and we're going to tell you some stories about some of our entrepreneurs that we went through with in class. I'm going to have Alex come up, and then I'll be back.
Thank you. This young man here was in our first class. His name is Darren Ford, and luckily he has, it's called Smooth and Sophisticated Lounge. The place is called a Brookhaven, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's just absolutely beautiful. And he went through the class, and he's doing phenomenally well. You know, Grandma said the proof is in the pudding. you know, I mean, we want successes in these endeavors and in what we are doing, and he is certainly I mean, he thinks he looks pretty good too with that red coat on. But this is at Brookhaven Lounge. He was in the first class in 2019, and although the knowledge has increased every year, he learned a lot. He's still in business 3 years later, and he's doing very well. Darren Ford, A. Brookhaven Lounge.
And so I wanted to talk about making homes construction. This is Erica Morgan. She was one of the winners in our 2021 cohort. I can remember her first walking in class, and she was really quiet. And so my goal when I start the class, I always like to talk to everybody. And I call people out. I hold them accountable because I figured out that most entrepreneurs don't have anybody they can talk to hold them accountable, who can actually coach them and teach them new things that will allow them to grow. And why waste your time? You know, time is money when it comes to business, okay? And so allowing her to come in the first class and just seeing her be quiet, but when I would call her out, she'd be like, oh, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. I was like, man, she's sharp. She is sharp. And then when she started doing her presentation, I really started to see her really open up and start talking about how she wanted to let her family know that what she was doing previously, she's putting it all in. And now they went through our loan process, and they actually are going to start one of our first new loans when it comes to our blighted home restoration. And so we are looking to start redoing local homes, and we're wanting Maconites to be owners so they can rent it out and so they can love the community that they're in.
And then I get to talk to you about Matera. So Matera actually first came to us right after COVID. She never really just kind of tried to avoid the whole credit building system entirely, but she actually had a ding on her credit report because of a car accident that she was in that the insurance company of the driver fault was supposed to pay, and it was on her credit report and shouldn't have been. So when COVID happened, she was not able to access any economic injury disaster loan monies because of her credit score. And it really wasn't that she had bad credit, it was that she had no credit. And she also was not able to get any PPP dollars because of how she had done her bookkeeping and filed her tax returns. Many people who are familiar with those processes. So when she first came to us, we started working with her on building her personal credit and helping her better understand how she was going to need to start filing her taxes, demonstrating better how her business entities were making money and so on. And then she ended up enrolling in this year's Downtown Diversity Initiative. And not only was she one of the winners, she was the winner. She has learned her way around financials so well. When she did her presentation, I literally cried because she had improved so much. And she's actually, so Darren didn't need any financial assistance from us. We are about to make a loan to Macon Homes and Construction, and she has been approved with her business partner, Shabria, to buy her first piece of property, a commercial real estate building in downtown Macon. And she also is in the process of applying for a loan to expand her concept niche, which is a lounge and hookah bar, to include a kitchen and start serving food. And so this conversion of some of our downtown entrepreneurs and owner occupants is something that's really important to us. Before I talk to you about that, I do just want to summarize what we've talked to you about today and the tools that we have found to be really helpful, and then I think can be some takeaways for you guys to potentially apply in your communities. And the first is around partnerships. I mean, for us, it was so critical to pair with Alex. Especially the first couple years, to have access to businesses that, one, maybe didn't see themselves in downtown Macon, two, that we just had no relationships with that he had by being in the community for so many years. And also, when it comes to financials, you've got to build a lot of trust, and it can really take time. And so if you can partner with people in your community who have already done some of that trust building, as well as to help you better access some of your talented BIPOC entrepreneurs, that's really critical in the process for business recruitment. Of course, the training and networking, there's a lot that's universal around being a successful entrepreneur, and we're happy to talk with you about what we've done. There's a lot of stuff out there that's free, but you are going to need to also figure out what's really important locally that are important resources. For instance, for us, Georgia has a really great preservation tax credit program. Our whole downtown is in it's a National Register Historic District, so we use preservation tax credits as a really important tool to close financing gaps on projects. That's not going to apply in all communities, so you need to figure out what's really relevant in your market and coach your entrepreneurs and your real estate developers on those things. And then they always need market data, like what Ricardo was talking about, like who are the main people who come to your downtown, who lives in your downtown, any of that kind of information that you can help them get, especially for startups, because that's all they have to test if their concepts are viable. And also adult learning principles. I mean, adults learn better through exchange. And so that was, Ricardo talked about why having them do the videos and then come to class and digest and talk about things has proven to be a much more effective teaching tool. So all of those things could be very relevant if you're trying to empower more of your BIPOC entrepreneurs in your community. And Newtown Macon, I've worked for some many smaller nonprofits in this space. Not everybody is going to be a lender as a downtown development organization or an economic development organization. The CDFI space, you've probably heard about it a lot more since COVID. It's really a burgeoning industry, and there's also a lot of equity investors now who are really ready to commit to investing with BIPOC entrepreneurs. So find folks who are ready to really redefine what risk is, and who understand that, you know, BIPOC entrepreneurs are really fantastic investments, and you just need to redefine what's worthy, investment worthy. And I just wanted to talk to you about our specific successes. So we have doubled. So we've always been about 50-50 since we started business lending as far as the number of loans in our portfolio, black to white, racially. But by loan dollars, it was only about 10% just about 2 years ago. So in the last year, we've more than doubled that. So we're just over 0.25% of our loan dollars now that are dedicated to black ventures, and we're over 40% of our loan dollars that are dedicated to BIPOC ventures, both on the small business and real estate side. We have really been able to see a real change in the storefront ownership. We've increased the percentage of the amount of black businesses in our downtown that are black owned by 7%. So we've moved from 18 to 25% in the last year. And we've increased our overall storefront occupancy, and increased it from about 75% to 80%. And then I keep coming back to this. We have financed 5 black-owned real estate developments. So we've converted 5 renting black entrepreneurs into real estate owners. And this is a really huge priority for us as an organization. So Newtown Macon, our parent organization, Newtown Loans, the CDFI, we're really focused on what we're calling our locally led revitalization. So we're not saying outsider exclusive, because it takes outside investment, it can take outsider vision and collaborators to inspire the revitalization of your downtown. But if your revitalization is championed by your local residents, then you ensure that it's going to be more representative of your community and more integrated. This is the antidote to the unfortunate side of gentrification, which is the displacement of your residents and your long-time standing businesses. If they own their building, they're not going to get displaced, and they control the trajectory of their business. And then we know that real estate in the United States is the key tool for wealth building. And so this concept of locally led revitalization and really focusing, and we have some benchmarks that we're trying to meet on converting entrepreneurs and owner occupants. We believe that this is the most critical tool for us to change our story and make it from being the most redlined city in the country to championing the most racially integrated revitalization of a downtown in America. So we would love to talk to y'all a little more about our work if you have any questions.
I just want to add one little piece of advice that I've discovered in trying to deal with these entrepreneurs. A lot of people think that because they are artisans and that they have a particular skill, like they can bake or they know how to drive a mill or drive a car, then they think that's directly associated with being an entrepreneur. and it's not there. It's a whole lot more. Because you're a carpenter doesn't mean you're ready to be a contractor. So in your approach to dealing with interested individuals, you need to make that distinction because they think because they're the best, they can drive a nail behind their back, then they think that's gonna automatically qualify them to make money, and it's not. The other thing I like to mention is that it's so important, the collaboration is so important. I'm a private citizen, you know, and I'm an entrepreneur. I don't work for Newtown Maker, though I love them, you know. So it's important to try to get other entities in your community, both from a public side and a private side, to work together because everybody wins. Everybody wins through the utilization of DEI, particularly in the downtown area, because you want them to flourish. Come on. Boom, 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 boom.